So we're going live to all our school families across the province on YouTube, I believe the connection is today. But thank you for the trustees for taking the time to come together for our regular scheduled public meeting. Do want to recognize a couple of our trustees that are exposing themselves, I shouldn't say it like that, but are sticking their feet out and hands out there to get public support in their nominations to municipal elections. We have the Honourable Representative, or hopeful for Ward 2 in St. John's, and then Pam is in Cornerbrook, and Steve is representing or running for the mayor of Conception Bay South. So good luck to all. Great, whenever you can contribute, it's like being a trustee, you make a difference at whatever you get involved in, and the time it takes to do it makes it better for, in this particular case, the residents of the communities you're in or the students that we're doing. So thanks again for tuning in today. We have got a normal meeting and it should progress fairly smoothly, so can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? So moved by Wayne, seconded by Tom. All in favor? Thank you. So the next order of business is the consideration of minutes of June 12th, 2021. As is always the case, we circulate all the documentation before, so the trustees should have had a chance to go through the pertinent information. So are there any errors or omissions that have been identified in the minutes? Hearing none, can I get a motion to accept, moved by Guy, seconded by Eric. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Those against? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next order of item was business arising, which there isn't from the actual minutes. So the next order of business is the director's report, and I'll turn to Tony for that. Just before we go to Tony, this is our first meeting since the start of this particular school year. And coming off last year, this is a new year again, which has always represented significant change in terms of the changes in COVID, changes in resources. But I do want to take the opportunity to thank all our staff that support our schools in all the various locations. To, you know, the job that they have to do in very changing and different circumstances, it takes a lot of effort to make sure that this works, and it works. And we should be proud of that, and I really want to thank those people that go the extra mile when the school started up for the sake of the children. So, Tony.
Thank you, Chair. Director's report for September 25th, 2021. Topics to be covered, we'll just briefly cover the school reopening plan for this year. Somewhat of a COVID update, and then we'll dip into what transpired last year in a summary of our annual report, which is being tabled today, and then conclude with some comments around our philosophy, ever-growing and ever-expanding of deep learning. So the Back to School plan was released on August 12th. It was a collaborative document between the Department of Education and the two school districts. CFSP and ourselves, Newfoundland Labrador English School District. Based on guidance from Health, the Health have indicated to us there are two environments which we could operate under this year, and that would be based on a low or high risk. In a low risk environment, that would be near normal with just certain precautions. However, based on public health guidance for a particular school, community, larger geographical area, a high-risk scenario may have to be adopted. And we've seen that occur recently, for example, in the Bay Verde area. Of course, we're highly recommending that vaccines occur. It helps all of us. It maintains students in school if we can have a highly vaccinated public. So the higher percentage, the better off we all are, and keep our young people learning as they should in a face-to-face environment. Just to cover some of the areas, and in this slide differentiates between the low risk and the high risk, and you can see the various differences. I should also add that in a high risk environment, we would then look at the scenarios employed last year. Scenario 1, which is face-to-face learning with some restrictions. Scenario 2, which is a hybrid or blended, possibly, and scenario 3, which would be virtual learning. And we're prepared to pivot to either of those should we be identified in a high-risk environment, and those various scenarios would come into play. With respect to a bit of an update, since the back-to-school plan was released, on September 18th, there was a public health measure put in place by the Chief Medical Officer that masks were required for all K-12 teachers, all students in grades 4 to 12, particularly, and all students in common areas and on buses. As well, the return to school plan provided, again, as I alluded to earlier, a new approach to opening with different measures depending on the risk environment, and we may move from any time from low to high risk. And this has occurred a couple of times now in our province since the beginning of the school year. Not all COVID situations are treated the same. And largely this is a medical decision, medical calculus being applied with liaison with our regional directors. And then we communicate that to the school involved or the series of school communities involved. There is also a factor that can be introduced as well, and that is potential operational impacts. From time to time, we may have to look at the public health guidance and look at what's happening with respect to contact tracing and testing, and if it impacts our human or physical resources, we may have to make a decision based on operational reasons as well, and that's occurred once or twice in this environment. So what happens, just to be clear, if there is a concern with the school community, public health will reach out at any time of the day or night. And hats off to the hardworking folks in the regional health authorities who would contact our individuals, and a lot of times this happens in the evening because of the cycle of the testing results being relayed. Once we get that information, we will engage the school leadership. We will, once we know what the public health advice is after sharing of some information and some discussion, we will relay that decision through a letter that goes out from the regional assistant director to that entire school community. Then, if there is follow-up, so for example, if there are individuals identified that must be contact traced and given special instructions with respect to testing, or all that comes from medical. In the past, medical has, public health have engaged through phone contact the family that's affected. Recently, we've been taking the public health correspondence and disseminating it through our own means at the school level. So, in summary, the whole school gets informed. If there's a staff member or student, and we don't often know the difference. We're not being advised of that public health. We're just advised there is a case, and the various classes or elements of the school that are affected would get then subsequent correspondence from public health within a matter of minutes or hours. It usually happens very quickly, and then we move from there. I can reassure the public that our experience with the regional health authorities is that they're on this constantly. It is really a 24/7 operation, and our folks are engaged at all times. So if it does come down, the school community is informed right away, and then any special instructions maintain status or put in additional measures. Okay. So I'll turn now to last year. So some of this is, again, it's a process whereby we submit an annual report to government every year, and it covers these three areas for the last school year. Of course, a school year that was impacted by COVID, and it does cover, because of the way the reporting works, it bridges our fiscal year from July 1st to June 30th of the next year. So, September 2020 saw the reopening of in-person classes for K-12 students that were suspended, if you remember, on Friday the 13th, March 2020, which was the last day of face-to-face instruction that year, due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In-person classes provided a welcome opportunity for students to connect with their peers and teachers, albeit with several health and safety protocols in effect. Professional learning was a huge focus for the reopening. It was delivered to headquarters and regional office staff, administrators, teaching staff, student assistants, school secretaries, custodians, bus drivers, the entire gamut of our staff, to provide safe environments for students and staff amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. It was delivered in the period September 3rd to 4th, and also throughout the year, where approximately 8,000 people participated in training. Quite a large undertaking and very important for the safety of our students and staff. In addition, we focused on assessment practices. There was a lot of both synchronous and asynchronous professional learning for teachers, emphasis on social and emotional learning, and very aware that the world was experiencing a shared trauma, so we used trauma-informed practice to govern how we prepared for and conducted that year. With respect to additional resources, the Department of Education allocated some $26 million for school reopening. $14 million was provided for the procurement of additional busing for the reduction in the capacity from 70 to 46. And the remainder went to additional school allocations, so particularly guidance counselors, contract substitute teachers in certain schools of larger population, remote learning teachers, increased student assistant hours, and occupational health and safety resources, as well as a doubling, really, essentially, of custodial services. We distributed, over the course of the year, there was a huge processor shortage worldwide, which did interrupt some of the delivery, but ultimately 35,000 Chromebooks were distributed to students in grades 7 to 12 last year, by the end of the year. And we also had teachers being provided with laptops. So every teacher, K to 12, in the province was provided with a laptop. So a significant amount of professional learning was also conducted to prepare for the various scenarios that we encountered during the year. So moving from scenario 1 through 2 to 3 did require ongoing professional learning. The strategic plan that we have focuses on student engagement throughout the school development model. And this is a collaborative model that engages students, parents, and student councils to enhance student engagement and success. And there are 7 determinants, as covered on this slide, and each one of them was a focus area for our various schools through the good work of our directors of schools in leading and engaging with principals. On the topic of student engagement and success, there were monthly meetings with the directors of schools, the families of those directors of schools, solutions to support successful school improvement, and really the focus was on our vision and values and student engagement for all. Certainly the Board of Trustees is no stranger to our emphasis on deep learning. The district continues to focus on implementing and supporting new pedagogies for deep learning. And those are essentially really teaching strategies and system changes to allow students to have the skills to be successful in life, good at learning, good at life. We held a number of virtual sessions throughout the year. The new pedagogies for deep learning sessions focused on 4 learning elements of deep learning, that being partnerships, environments, leveraging digital, and overall pedagogical practices. At the end of June 2021, we have 93 of our 250-odd schools that were fully involved and engaged with learning sessions for new pedagogies for deep learning. And there are more to follow, but you have to start in stages, and we've got our first 93 well underway. Another of our, under the category of category here of expanded technology, we did support scenario 2 and 3, again, the blended learning model and the totally virtual model, and really it was informed by our teacher practice. With respect to equity, health, and well-being, quite a focus on virtual Indigenous Alliance. There were bi-weekly virtual meetings held for teachers and students to engage in conversations and learning. These meetings included teacher-led and student-led discussions. As well, the district encouraged student Indigenous alliances within all schools to help create a space and a place for Indigenous voice where students connect with Indigenous culture, traditions, history, and language. These alliances focus on creating connectedness, identity, and belonging for all students in all communities. We, as well, were graced by the presence of Chief Michelle Joe, who's the spiritual chief of the Mi'kmaq of Newfoundland and Labrador, and Sheila O'Neill, a drum carrier, a member of the Halipuu Mi'kmaq First Nation. They provided information on how to bring Indigenous culture and identity to our school environments, and its importance in supporting Indigenous students' sense of belonging, connectedness, and engagement. The district continues to enhance financial management and control practices during the reporting period, building on work undertaken over the past several years. A new financial system, Kayenta, was purchased and configured, trained, and testing was undertaken in June 2021. The system went live on July 1st of 2021 and is in place for this current school year. It is a significant milestone for the district and schools. Kayenta is a fully integrated financial management system designed for school districts that provides more robust automated audit trail and accountability. Functionality is expected to make processes more efficient for all users, both at the district and at the individual school level. Phase 1 Kayenta Financials was launched July 5th of this year. Phase 2, integration of payroll and HR, was launched later in July, and a go-live date for the summer of 2022 is planned. Overall end result will be a more efficient and much-needed modern end-to-end enterprise solution that manages the education system of the province. Even with the challenges and additional work of navigating a pandemic, the team from Mr. Terry Hall's Corporate Service Division is on schedule and on target with the project. The district also introduced the Bus Planner web portal in June of 2021 in preparation for this school year. Bus Planner is a school bus scheduling and routing software. The parent portal enables parents to see their child's transportation eligibility and, if eligible, their transportation schedule, including bus stops, bus stop location, drop-off and pickup times, which can, of course, be amended live. So that sums up the annual report. Last part of the presentation really is a sort of where we are with deep learning right now after 1 year. So first of all, the involvement of our staff has been amazing. There was many tangible examples, multiple forms of evidence that we are enhancing student engagement. Many of our junior and senior higher educators are transforming their assessment practices to standards-based learning. Our students have voice and are advocating for what will help them learn. Their actions are leading the way, using their voices to engage and change the world. In terms of lead learners, we've had 50 individuals of their own accord come forward and wanted to be becoming part of deep learning certification. And these educators will be building capacity in deep learning by engaging in choice of independent modules and participating in deep learning experience with a mentor. The next steps will see the district implement deep learning certification programs. In terms of partnerships, there are many, very many to highlight. I don't have time to do all of them, but I would highlight one in particular. And this is a good example of how you can leverage partnerships. The Ocean Learning Partnership, the school district, the Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans, as well as Parks Canada, learn together to enhance engagement for all learners. This partnership is inspiring our educators who are operating as learners in this environment to explore local marine environments. The district continues to expand learning partnerships to support and celebrate the learning journey of our educators who create optimal learning environments in their schools. Also, this summer, capitalizing on the enthusiasm that is building around deep learning, we offered a summer learning series for educators in August. There were 40 sessions and more than 1,700 session registrants. New networks are formed from these collaborative learning spaces. Sessions focused on one or all of the 4 elements of deep learning, and that is learning partnerships, again, leveraging digital learning environments and pedagogical practices. Well received and something that would be replicated going forward. As of June, the end of June 2021, 93 of our 250 schools collaborated with the district teams to continue to build capacity with educators interested in engaging students to change the world. These schools are signed on to receive formal training and support. Since then, we've added another 7 schools for a total of 100 now for formal training and support on deep learning, and this initiative would continue. This is really all about building capacity within our system, and whether you're a member of the formal 100 or not, there are individual teachers also engaged with deep learning through all of our various resources, virtual or asynchronous or synchronous professional learning. The vision and goals of deep learning is embedded in our strategic plan. District teams use deep learning tools to enhance and design opportunities to engage students. We are seeing our schools adapting these resources to meet their local context as well. In all of the presentations that you'll see on deep learning from schools, there is the same context, but an incredible amount of variance based on local conditions, local environments, local talents, and student voice and choice. Evidence of these common beliefs and practices related to our goal of enhancing and creating learning opportunities for all learners through deep learning is emerging. This summer, the district shared a day of deep learning with the Minister of Education and members of the education staff, Department of Education staff, to build a shared understanding of that work. And I can tell you it was very, very well received. And the teachers that participated in that came in here voluntarily and enthusiastically on a hot July day to impart that, and it was really inspiring. So, just a couple of photos of some of the activities as we start the school year. Looking forward to a good year. We are very cognizant that the COVID environment is still present. We are prepared to react and pivot as required. We do value the safety and well-being of all students and all employees, and we will follow public health advice to the letter in that regard. But overall, we're anticipating a very successful school year. Chair, that is the Director's report, subject to questions.
Thank you very much. Anyone have questions for Tony on the report? No, Tony, I think is what's represented every year is that there are experts in the province that know how to get schools started and set up for the year, and they do the best they can, and they get the job done. And it's always reflective in the fact that even though we do run into challenges, we're able to deal with those challenges in a timely way, and I really do give accolades from the Board of Trustees to our professional staff for doing that. If there's no more questions, we'll certainly move on to our next piece, which is the committee reports, and I will turn the table to Wayne Lee to give the Executive Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be working from the committee report, Executive Committee meeting minutes of August the 5th, which is included in your kit. There were no motions to bring to the table here. Discussions were about sold properties in Bay Roberts' primary property acquisition. With your permission, I would entertain any questions on those minutes.
Any questions? See?
Then I move the adoption of the minutes. Begging a seconder, please.
Seconded by Eric. Any questions, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Those against? Motion carries. Thank you for that,
That
Wayne.
concludes our report, sir.
Next committee report is the Finance and Operations Committee, and with Steve, our chair, we're going to go to John George.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Finance and Operations Committee met on September 17th via video conference. There were a number, all the necessary information and documents associated with that meeting have been included in the board meeting package. And there are a number of motions to bring forward at today's meeting. The first motion has to deal with the audit of the fiscal financing agreement of the Nunavut government, the funding for the year ending March 31st, 2021. A few comments on those, on that audited report. First is that the financial statements are prepared based on revenue and expense financial information recorded by the district related to the agreement for the year that's ending March 31st. And the format and the presentation of the financial statement is per the requirement of the Nunavut government to show expenditures by community. And the financial statements are also prepared on a non-consolidated basis and only include the ancillary funding provided by the government, the NG government, through the fiscal financial agreement to the district to enhance student programming in the 5 new Nunavut coastal communities. And the other important note is that the fiscal financial agreement operates on a balanced basis. So the motion is that the board approved the auditor's report and the accompanying audited financial statements of the fiscal financing agreement for the year ending March 31st, 2021, as recommended by the Finance and Operations Committee. So moved.
Can I get a seconder to that motion? Seconded by Wintz. Any questions, discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Those against? Motion carries. Back to you, John.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. The next motion has to deal with the quarterly budget status update for the period ended March 31st, 2021. The original budget was $829.28 million. The revised budget is $836.73 million. There was a budget increase of $7.44 million. Expenses are expected to remain within budget for the 2020 and 2021 fiscal year. There have been no changes to the budget since the December 2020 board report previously presented. And the schedules that are included in the documents, they summarize the operating results compared to the revised budget for the period ending March 31st, 2021. So the motion, Mr. Chair, is that the board approve the revised quarterly budget status update for the period ending March 31st, 2021, as recommended by the Finance and Operations Committee. So moved.
Can I get a seconder to that motion? Seconded by Guy. Questions, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion? Those against? Motion carries.
Okay. The next motion deals with property sale of Harbor Grace Primary to the Splash Center. And by way of some background information, Mr. Chair, in 2014, Eastern Health wanted an NLESD building in Harbor Grace, which at that time served as the base for the local community youth network operating as the Splash Center. To facilitate Eastern Health's acquisition of that building, Eastern Health funded the purchase of the land on which the district-owned Harbor Grace Primary building was built, which allowed the Splash Center to move there. The terms of the purchase were after 12 months, Eastern Health would advise if they wanted to keep Harbor Grace Primary or they would relinquish any claim to it. In spite of multitudes of contacts over the years, Eastern Health effectively chose to relinquish via their silence. So the Splash Center was supposed to be paying the operational cost of the Harbor Grace Primary, but no payments were ever made. NLESD, funded by the Department of Education, covered all of the utilities and the snow clearing expenses and a little more than $20,000 a year in municipal fees. NLESD staff provided a very basic level of maintenance, primarily patching the end of life to the roof of the building. So after consultation with the Department of Education, NLESD offered the building to the town of Harbor Grace, with Government NL providing a grant to replace the roof. After the town expressed concerns over the ability to fund the building operations, NLESD participated in a meeting with the area's joint councils. No agreement of transfer was reached, and consequently the building was placed for sale by tender, and the sole bid was less than $20,000. So given the relatively minor benefit of selling at this price, Government NL has requested that we facilitate a transfer of ownership of the Harbor Grace Primary to the Splash Center. Government NL has proposed the Splash Center pay NLESD $15,000 upfront, and we transfer ownership to them after 12 months, and they would pay NLESD a further $10,000 a year over the next 9 years. NLESD has made the transfer contingent on the Splash Center creating a separate road access versus all traffic going through the adjacent St. Francis School lot, given Splash intends on renting space to fund their ownership. So the motion, Mr. Chair, is that the board approve the disposition of Harbor Grace Primary to the Splash Center as recommended by the Finance and Operations Committee, subject to ministerial approval. So moved.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder? Seconded by Jean. Questions, discussion? Questions, Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This issue played out publicly over the last little while, and to be quite honest with you, the number of partners there, I didn't really understand the issues, and I've read through this and I've listened to John, and there's still parts of it that I don't understand. So I guess my question is relatively simple. Has this issue been resolved to the satisfaction of all parties? And now that this is a public issue and it's been documented and it's going through the public meeting process, can we expect that on a go-forward basis this has been resolved, or are we expecting to hear from feedback that this is not the case? It seems to me like it's been done.
My understanding is that it has been resolved, and it's just a matter of playing out the terms of the agreement is the only difference. Is there anything else, Terry, that you would add?
No, that's correct, Chair. This should bring an end state.
Okay, so it'll put us in a position where we don't, the liability will be moved on and the expenses will be moved on, and then we can get back to focusing on the primary mandate of our term.
Thank you.
Any further questions, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion? Those against? Motion carries. John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The district is also continuing to dispose of properties that are surplus to our operational needs, and to this end, it is our intention to place the following schools for sale by tender, or to transfer the properties to a municipality or a nonprofit identity for a nominal charge, or return to the denominational authority and/or split sale proceeds as required by Section 84 of the Schools Act 1997. There are also Crown land factors in some of these as well. We have been engaged with Crown lands with a view to expediting ongoing files, as well as attempting to create an efficient process for future disposition where Crown lands is involved. The buildings in question are Basque Memorial in Red Bay. This school was closed in June 2021, but has a restrictive Crown lease on the land that needs to be converted to an unrestricted grant before a sale can be conducted. We have Cherry Lane, CBS is the former board office. It's later used by various entities. The Anglican Synod has indicated that they will relinquish any claim subject to ministerial approval. So this has been sought and is pending judicial review for the minister. And Charlottetown Primary School, title search underway, but from prior board files, it has United Church interest, so a disposition agreement with the United Church may be required. We have Coley's Point in Bay Roberts. This school closed in June 2021. The land title is in the name of the United Church Board of Education for Coley's Point, so a disposition agreement with the United Church will be required in that case. We have Father Bernier Building in Buren, former regional office. This property has a restrictive Crown grant on the land that needs to be converted to a non-restricted grant before a sale can be concluded. The RC Episcopal Corporation previously signed a quitclaim acknowledging sole ownership by the NLESD. Long Island Academy, this school closed and the community was resettled. The district confirmed that the resettlement did not create a prohibition on sale, so recent media indicates there is still ongoing seasonal access. Millcrest Academy in Grand Falls, Windsor. The school has been closed for quite a few years, but there has been community interest, first by a nonprofit group, then by the adjacent hospice and the town. Ultimately, none of these have come to fruition, and the cost of heat, light, municipal fees approaches approximately $100,000 a year. The land is owned by the Roman Catholic Episcopal Corporation. The building is owned by NLESD, so a disposition agreement with the RC Episcopal Corporation is required. And Presentation Junior High in Cornerbrook. This building was built with the proceeds of an insurance claim from a fire at a prior Holy RC Episcopal Corporation owned school, making both the main building and the lands at the RC Episcopal Corporations. NLESD would have interest in a latter extension, but this is only 10% of the building, and thus it's not considered material. So consequently, the building and the land would be returned to the RC Episcopal Corporation. The motion, Mr. Chair, is that the board approve the disposition of the above noted properties by any of the three means listed above as recommended by the Finance and Operations Committee, and in each case, final disposition is subject to ministerial approval. So moved.
Can I get a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Guy. Questions, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Those against? Motion carries.
And, Mr. Chair, I guess the final one would be, I move the acceptance of the Finance and Operations committee report.
Thank you.
As
Can I get a
presented.
seconder? Seconded by Eric. All in favor? Aye. Those against? Motion carries. I think the chair was incompetent. Did you get a chance to do a motion to accept and reject the finance report or the executive report?
You're getting forgetful. Yes, we did.
Yes, we did. Perfect. So that was the one time this year I thought it was wrong. All right. Thank you for that. So now we're the next piece of business we're going to is we're moving on to new business, and we're looking to the Education Foundation report, and we're going to ask Trustee Jean Buck to provide us with that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Newfoundland and Labrador Education Foundation Committee met via Zoom on Wednesday, August 18th, and there were just 2 items for new business. The first was the approval of scholarship recipients for the 2020-21 school year. So for the 2021 school year, the Newfoundland and Labrador Education Foundation received 83 applications from students within the Newfoundland and Labrador English School District. And I just want to make a quick note there, a side note, that was actually down a little from previous years, and that's actually something that we're going to address and take a look at our next meeting. I'm sure it was probably COVID related as well, but we will be taking a look at that. This year's scholarship policy was updated to state that 36 scholarships of $1,000 each would be awarded to students graduating from NLESD schools across the province of Newfoundland and Labrador from all disciplines, advanced, academic, and general studies. A scholarship committee consisting of Scott Burden, Trustee Scott Burden, and Susan Hussey reviewed all the applications received. The marking was conducted by each member based on 3 components: essays, which could be worth up to 50 points, school community involvement and demonstrated need, which was 25 points, up to 25 points, and their graduation marks of their level 3 courses that could be worth up to 25 points of their score, and it was based on their overall average. So scores from both members averaged to reach the final scores for each applicant. And based on the selection criteria for each region, 36 successful candidates were chosen and recommended by the scholarship committee, and these are listed in the NLEF minutes that are with your board package. So the motion was presented and carried at the meeting that the Newfoundland and Labrador Education Foundation approve the successful candidates as listed for the Newfoundland and Labrador Education Foundation Scholarships 2020-2021. And the second item that was brought up for new business was the NLEF calendars for the 2021-22 school year. The NLESD staff are currently working on the final draft version of the calendar to forward to the printers. Saltwire has been the successful bidder for production of the NLEF calendars over the past several years, and as they have bid under the $1,000 purchasing threshold for this year, 3 quotes were not required. We've also, the number of calendars ordered were reduced to 1,100 this year to better reflect the amounts that are needed for distribution across the district. So a motion was presented and carried that the Newfoundland and Labrador Education Foundation Board approve this ordering process for the NLEF calendars for the 2021-22 school year. And that concludes, that was it for our 2 new business items.
Do you want to present a motion to accept the report from the... No, we don't need one.
We don't.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for that. Any questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next business item. We have 2 reports that there was no update on, so we won't be hearing from NLI SE or the School Milk Foundation, but we are going to turn to our Vice Chair, who's going to present a motion regarding a specific school with no students.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I beg the indulgence of the Assembly as the preamble is mostly for the benefit of those online who haven't this information. Lapoil is a settlement in Lapoil Bay in Newfoundland and Labrador. The community is inaccessible by road and is served by a ferry by a port in Rose Blanche. The town mainly works in the fishery. As of the 2016 census, the population is 87 people. The community has a school offering grades K to 9 and a small store. There's an Anglican church which offers services once a month. Healthcare is limited to a first responder and a visiting doctor who comes once a month, weather permitting. The town was the subject of an episode of Vices Abandoned. There was only one student in the local school. The last town-wide vote did not have enough support for the residents to accept provincial money to leave the settlement under the resettlement program. Douglas Academy School is a K-9 school located in Lapoil and is part of the Newfoundland Labrador English School District. As of June 2021, the enrollment was one student in grade 6. There were no additional students to be registered for the 2021-22 school year. The parents of the student in question decided to move to Port aux Basques in order to register the student at St. James Regional High for the 2021-22, 22-23, and 23-24 school years to provide the student with the educational advantage of attendance in a larger school. The parents avail of a bursary program to facilitate this move. The parents have agreed that the district will have no obligation to operate Douglas Academy or any other school or to provide instruction in Lapoil if they decide to return to Lapoil. As such, I will bring the following motion: whereas Douglas Academy, Lapoil, Newfoundland, had not had children in attendance since June of 2021 and no students registered for the upcoming school year, be it therefore resolved that Douglas Academy School, Lapoil, Newfoundland, will close effective the date of this motion.
Can I get a seconder to the motion, please? Seconded by Jean. Any further questions or discussions? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Those against? Thank you. Motion carries. Okay, the next piece of business that we have under new business is the formal adoption of our annual report, and I'm going to ask Susan Tobin, our policy manager, to give a brief statement and present, and then our vice chair will present the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The 2020-21 draft annual report for the Newfoundland and Labrador English School District is being presented today for Board of Trustee approval in principle. This annual report represents the first year of the district's 2020-2023 strategic plan. The report will be submitted to the provincial government for review and subsequently tabled in the House of Assembly in the fall of 2021. Any substantive changes will be brought back to the board for approval. Motion to come from the Vice Chair.
Mr. Chairman, I am moving that the board approve the 2020-2021 draft annual report as presented, acknowledging that there may be small changes proposed following the provincial government review.
Can I get a seconder to that motion? Seconded by John George. Any questions? Concerns? Motion carries. Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Motion carries. Thank you. The final section of the meeting deals with correspondence, and all the trustees have received the correspondence in their kits. Are there any questions or any pieces that anyone would like to raise regarding the correspondence? Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of things from the correspondence. The vacancy that was declared in Zone 16 and subsequently filled in July, the vacancy created a hole in the executive committee that has not yet to be filled. Is it the intention to fill that position prior to our AGM? A lot of time has passed since the zone was declared vacant in April, and we haven't moved on it.
Okay, normally they would get fixed at the next meeting of the board, and it hasn't been fixed for this particular time. There's no thought or a sort of reason not to do it or do it. So we can certainly fill that vacancy. I think there are two eligible candidates for that particular position within Steve and within Peter. So after this session's over, we'll determine if there is somebody who's interested and willing to serve, and then if there is only one out of the two, then we can do a telephone vote or
Okay.
follow-up.
Yeah, thank you. The other question was regarding 9.1. It's a significant document that we all received on Monday of last week. I think it's a 35-page document. And it was generated just after our June meeting. and has a covering letter to the Minister of Education, copied to the Premier of the province and the Minister of Finance, President Treasury Board, with your signature as the board chair. And it details a lot of recommendations on a go-forward basis as we enter into an arrangement that's going to see the district ultimately fold into the department. And it outlines tens of millions of dollars of efficiencies to be found. And I have a couple of concerns that I'd like to address about that. And I understand there was a request that came to the district to have this submitted. But from a trustee's perspective, when I saw this on Monday, I was surprised because it was generated and it didn't come back to the board for input, and it went out under a cover letter with the signature of the chair of the board, which I'm not sure is the way that we should be doing stuff. In the interest of openness and transparency and communications inside of our Board of Trustees, I'm not sure that that's the way that this should have been done. Some of the stuff that's contained in it, had we had the opportunity to discuss, I wouldn't have supported. And I think that I should have had the opportunity to express that in a form before this was finalized and sent off to the Premier and the Ministers under your signature. The proposed structure of the new board, I have concerns with and issues with. The proposal for the school review process going forward, I think we need to have a thorough discussion about as well. I understand there were timelines, but I think the process itself, I don't think we should have done it that way. I think that we should have come back, and there was a willingness around this table during our June meeting to engage in some discussion. The Chair of Finance and Operations offered to begin working on this regularly, to have some input, and I expressed the same sentiment, and others did as well. So I think it's unfortunate that this has been received with the understanding that it's been vetted through the Board of Trustees when it hasn't, and I question doing stuff that way. I question why we don't have the discussion, express our concerns, and nothing might have changed, and it still would have went out under a cover letter with your signature. But people like me who like to have input would have had the opportunity, and I didn't, and I think that in this circumstance it's very unfortunate.
I guess the first point, Scott, is I would agree that in an ideal circumstance that we would go through a process where we have the opportunity to fully vet everything that goes out. In this particular piece, things were transpiring very quickly, and that's not an excuse, but we were asked, or the district was asked to do this by the minister, and if you remember the times and dates of announcements and things that were going on, it was felt that it was absolutely critical to get a significant amount of information into the fold. Like, this was generated by the district in the best, honest approach to trying to move forward to sort of inform a decision as opposed to being told what the decision is. And this did not direct any decisions from my understanding. It was an information piece. It was more of a highlight of highlighting different concerns that should be taken into consideration when government was making their decisions at the time. And I would agree in an ideal situation that these would be fully vetted. In this particular context, whether you agree or disagree, the timing of it made that we had to get it into the post. And certainly as our Chair of Finance and Operations, last time the willingness to have a discussion and the table itself to have a discussion. In this particular context, the timelines weren't available to us to do that. And I think some of the precipitation, some of the pieces that will precipitate out of the decisions the government made will be outlined when the minister comes to have a conversation with us at a point in time.
I understand your response. I understand your reasoning. It's not saying that I endorse it and I agree with it. Even if I did agree with everything that you've just said, I think there's been enough time since June 15th to September 20th that, as the chair of the board, you could have communicated this to all the trustees so that we would have been able to go through this document thoroughly, because this is a big deal. This is tens of millions of dollars and a lot of stuff that ultimately we might have to make decisions on that we could have vetted, and we could have had a session this weekend as part of that, but we didn't, and it wasn't even on the agenda. And I wasn't going to raise it on the agenda because I'm the big mouth that always wants to put stuff on the agenda. So if it passed the smell test with everybody else, fine, but it didn't with me.
Okay.
And I think that I don't think that it's the way that we should do stuff.
Okay, so there's two components to that, the piece. I agree, and I've already said I agree that in an ideal circumstance of timelines that we would have been able to do something different. The other piece that I would certainly stress is that these are not decisions. These were just, in light of what had been said and transpired from government to us at the particular point in time about the fiscal realities and the things that we have to do in order to function and operate within the constraints that the province has, and you've articulated on a number of occasions. These are just examples of opportunities that if, what we talked around the table, if the handcuffs were taken off of us and we had to look at various things, this is what we would look at and would consider. Some of these items on here would never, as you take, would never take the smell test and would never pass, and it would go through the Board of Trustees. But it was an opportunity to really say that the Board of Trustees know and have ideas about different things that could be considered if the handcuffs were taken off. So it was more of an opportunity like that than really giving direction to government of where to save and what to do. I would suspect that we need to, as a group, need to hold and find out what the decisions of government are going to be over the next little while, and then we can move forward with some of the action items that are required. The reviews of schools and stuff like that may be something that they consider in the future, but we haven't got there to the details of that yet. Any further trustees have comment regarding?
Can I speak for a second?
Yes, Peter.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to. No, I certainly understand Scott's concerns. Whether or not it's official policy or not, I suppose, is a matter of discussion. Just under the governance piece in that report, we're suggesting a new sort of advisory board and how it would constitute itself. I noticed there was 4 appointees there, specialists who would be, I would imagine, people who've worked in the education system before, and then the appointments from the regions. I'm wondering why we wouldn't be asking the government to include the Federation of School Councils as a member of this new constituted board or governance operation. I believe that, I'd like to hear Tony's thoughts on it, but, this is an organization that represents every school council in the province. And I've been advocating for 10 years that we have representation from that organization at the board. Just wondering if that's something that we have the appetite to consider at some point, because I think it's important to bring that balance in under the new arrangements, especially if it's going to be appointed people, not elected people. The trustees, the representation from the Federation of School Councils would certainly be elected every year from school councils across the province, and it would be nice to have that voice at the table if possible.
I think in the document it didn't really target the appointees. They did have regional reps. We had certain regional reps, but the appointees were at the discretion. So this Federation of School Councils could have certainly been a consideration within those expertise ones that you talked about and alluded to. I think the notion is once you start going down a road of identifying, then you'd be identifying lots, and it doesn't give the flexibility to government, I guess, to make the choice that they need to make.
I'm not interested in giving government any flexibility. I'm saying is that there's hundreds of groups out there that have educational concerns. There is no one single constituted group in this province, but the Federation of Newfoundland and Labrador School Councils, who speaks for school councils, who are the only people that are elected to have a voice in this whole system, especially when we do the mergers. I can't understand why we wouldn't specifically ask that the Federation of School Councils be included as a permanent seat, whoever the chair is, when they're elected each year on the next board. It's certainly something I'd like to see us advocate for. And, unless somebody can give me a real good reason why in this new undemocratic system we're going to have, that we're not going to include the Federation of School Councils, I'll continue to advocate for it. I don't understand it. This is a voice should be there. And when Prince Edward Island went with their experiment, which I will point out, turned out not to work for them, and they've gone back to elected boards now, the critical part of selling this to the public was that school councils were going to be very involved in advising the minister. I'd like to see that here as well. That's just all.
Yep. No, thank you for your thoughts on that, Peter. Again, I don't think anyone knows what's going to end what's going to come out the other end of this particular process, but I think there's lots of inputs. The PEI example has been, I am understanding that has been analyzed from a provincial point of view, and I've seen some of the other places like Nova Scotia, and some of those have been analyzed as well. So government, I'm sure, is in a posture that they're reviewing all this at this particular point in time, and I don't think they've settled on a final outcome. So there's opportunities for people to impact that piece. Are there any further commentaries regarding? Okay, thank you. No questions regarding other correspondence? Hearing none. Thank you. So the next step of the game is, can I get a motion to adjourn to closed? So moved, Tom. Seconded by John George. All in favor? So moved. Thank you very much. And we'll just take a quick break to get organized for the closed session.